A naval strike group led by Venus is heading toward Iran, and according to rumors, there are even two groups moving in that direction. And next is Delta, the same one that, as I mentioned before, stole Madura just 10 kilometers from the Iranian border. Bombers have been brought in, and Israel and NATO have been informed. Against this backdrop, Trump is offering Iran to postpone our strike on them if the Ayatollahs agree to certain conditions or concessions. Iran must neither create nor attempt to acquire nuclear weapons, and Iran must stop shooting and executing protesters. And I don't remember if it was mentioned there. Or it's about financing terrorism, but I'm sure this issue will be raised. Iran must take part in regional solutions to problems, security issues. Well, probably this is where stopping the financing and sponsoring of terrorism will be included. I would say that this is a significant step back from what I, or we together, would have wanted. Namely, the return of Shah Pahlavi and the prevention, let's say, of the mullahs returning to their role as oppressors of the Iranian state and instigators of various technical acts and events. Of course, I would like Iran to become again what it once was, under the father, that is, Pahlavi, when he was king, Reza Pahlavi I, and his son, that's Reza Pahlavi II, that it would revert to a secular, supposedly pro-Western state.
Hello, good morning, Brian. Well, you can certainly see that all the chess pieces are moving around the world. And we are learning from military sources that the United States is sending at least one aircraft carrier to this region right now. We don't know yet whether it will be the aircraft carrier Abraham Lincoln, which is currently in the South China Sea, or one of the two aircraft carriers that have just left Norfolk or San Diego. Earlier this week, Axios reports the Mossad director arrived in the United States today for talks with envoys, including White House envoy on Iran, Steve Witkoff. At the same time, Senator Lindsey Graham announced that he is heading to Israel, urging the president to take action.
People are being killed in the street. If this isn't a distraction, this is the moment when we need to act. We're dealing with the most brutal regime on the planet. And if you don't realize that this is the greatest moment for change since the fall of the Berlin Wall, you're missing out on a lot. This is a religious war.
Subtitles created by Dima Torzok. So, the Wall Street Journal reports that the president was informed that an attack on Iran does not guarantee the collapse of the regime. However, yesterday, the Treasury Department announced sanctions against 5 Iranian officials. Today, the president has a roundtable this morning on rural health care issues. It is open to the press, so we'll see if he answers any questions about further actions in Iran.
It seems the military told Trump that the war would not be limited to a single strike, and that to topple the regime, ground troops would have to be sent in. Today, by the way, Mossad and representatives of other Israeli intelligence agencies, as well as Israeli diplomats, flew to the United States for consultations with their counterparts. Well, presumably they will be discussing Iran.
And in the meantime,
let's invite
retired General Jack Keane. General,
what are our options in Iran?
We have a lot on the agenda, and I think a lot has already happened. I mean, obviously, the president has made a statement, and his authority is on the line. And listen, when he gives his word, he always keeps it. And this is simply to hold accountable those who killed their own citizens. That's his promise to the people who were out there on the streets, ready to risk their lives. And in thousands of cases, that's exactly the tragedy that happened here. So what's likely happening and what might happen? Well, first of all, we're trying to put pressure on Iran regarding its ability to sell more oil than it used to. That has already happened. This by itself is not a decisive factor, but it contributes. We're probably helping the protesters communicate better, given that the Iranians have shut down the internet, and this is a covert operation to do something like this. It's likely that cyber operations are being conducted against Iranian systems. Command and control, their telecommunications, the capabilities of the IRGC and the Basij militia on the streets to communicate effectively. In addition, cyber operations against their capabilities to monitor the population as such. All of these are capabilities that the United States possesses and that are unmatched. Our offensive cyber potential is truly something very special. And then we move on to information. We're probably conducting information operations against the oppressors, their mid-level leaders, those who also carry weapons. Because if and when, and I believe it's a matter of when, kinetic operations are carried out against this organization, against its leaders, we want there to be division within it. We want this organization to fall apart. We want some of them to join the protesters. Because the reality is that the regime will be in much greater trouble as a result of kinetic operations, and then the administration itself moves on to kinetic operations. The leaders and organization are clearly engaged in suppression, but it should be taken into account that Iran still has the ability to carry out a retaliatory strike. Against whom could they launch a retaliatory strike? Against American bases and the state of Israel? So first of all, let's make sure that the protection of these systems is as good as it can possibly be, and this absolutely must be taken into account. And then what should we do with the targets set to reduce Iran's ability to carry out these retaliatory attacks? All of these are the things that are presented to the president when he makes decisions and chooses options. And obviously that means we'll have to expand the target list to make sure we destroy some of Iran's ballistic missiles. I suppose, I don't know, I don't ask those kinds of questions, but just looking at what needs to be done, you always have to consider what Iran's response will be. Let's be clear. The goal of this attack was never that we were going to overthrow this regime or that we would achieve a change of power. I mean, I completely disagree with that article. The president knew about this from the very beginning. At best, the result of this will be that we put the Iranian regime on the path to its complete collapse.
That is, the United States strike, it seems, from the point of view of the American military, will not lead to the fall of the regime, but it may lead to a significant weakening of the regime. We don't have an organization inside Iran to take power. There is no such organization inside Iran at all. In other words, even if the Revolutionary Guard loses its launchers, its missiles, its tanks, they are still probably the only organization in Iran that can take control of the country.
Hi, Sandra. Well, the president was just asked what convinced him not to strike Iran, and he said that no one convinced him. He convinced himself. He said their decision to halt the executions had a major impact on him. But the president also stated that all options are still on the table, including military action against Iran. In the past 24 hours, there have been signs that one or even two carrier strike groups may be sent to the Middle East. The United States Navy does not confirm, but they do confirm that the aircraft carrier Abraham Lincoln, which was in the South China Sea earlier this week, is already on its way. It will take at least 1 week for it to arrive. A squadron of stealth bombers is expected to be deployed, along with major reinforcements to ground, air, and sea missile defense systems, to ensure the protection of 30,000 American service members in the region and in Israel. Norm Rewell served in the CIA for 34 years, specializing in Iran.
The president's approach is actually traditional. He has used a range of diplomatic tools, which vary from bringing this issue before the United Nations Security Council. Today, he introduced serious sanctions that are only just beginning to be implemented. And finally, we, the United States, already have significant forces capable of delivering a powerful strike against Iran.
Experts say it would be a mistake to assume that a single military strike would lead to the overthrow of the regime, but it could definitely destabilize the regime.
I believe we could go in there, disrupt their command and control, deprive them of the ability to respond, and deliver significant strikes. Remember, some of the heaviest tonnage came from the United States. You don't necessarily have to be right there. I think we could deliver a significant strike.
We can, yes, we're advancing. I don't know, maybe we're bringing in troops. Maybe we're conducting reconnaissance to see where to strike. Maybe we're, I don't know, training Iranians, or maybe we really don't want to get involved in the war. And we're okay with an option like Venezuela. Well, today's Venezuela, we don't know what will happen tomorrow. You stay at the helm, but we tell you what's most important. You're the head, I'm the neck. I turn you where I want. But right now I don't understand. But there's a serious chance that Trump hasn't yet developed a clear position on what to do next.
Sources tell Fox that if the president does decide to carry out military strikes, they will look different than last summer, more large-scale and offensive in nature. Sandra?
All right, Jennifer Griffin, thank you very much for all of this, Jennifer.
John, okay, Sandra, let's have retired Air Force Brigadier General John Teichert explain. The Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group has moved to the Arabian Sea. What do you think? I know Arab countries hosting our military bases aren't keen on us launching anything against Iran from there. What do you think about Lincoln and his strike group going there?
John, this is an example of support going to the protesters. It gives them additional opportunities for offense and defense. It's a powerful signal to the protesters that we still support them. And it also forces the regime to consider an external threat in addition to internal security. And finally, I think this gives the president options if he decides to impose a blockade on the sanctioned tankers, like we did in Venezuela, to completely choke off the regime's financial flows. The continuation is good.
As for the Arab countries in the region that don't want us to launch from there, what are their concerns?
I think it's partly their concerns about oil price stability or something else. They didn't say no, just not yet. I think they felt that this week wasn't the right time, that strikes wouldn't change the situation for the protesters. But maybe the answer will be different in a week, especially when there's a carrier group there.
After receiving assurances from Iran that the killings would stop, the president felt less urgency to act against Iran. Here's what he said before leaving.
Earlier this week, you urged Iranian protesters to keep fighting and promised help. Is help still coming, or have your conditions changed?
We'll see. As you know, Iran canceled the execution of more than 800 people yesterday. They were going to execute over 800 people, and I really respect the fact that they canceled it.
So the president said that this is a red line if protesters are killed, and especially if captured protesters are hanged. Do you think military action is now off the table? Can the president consider other options in the meantime?
I think the president likes to have options. Strikes might happen today or next week, but I still think the diplomatic option is important to him. The survival of these detainees is important. But I also believe that the 2 new sanctions packages he introduced this week add extra urgency, which will prevent Ayatollah from continuing to provide funding. That's a big step, too.
So, the Iranians give the president assurance that they won't kill the protesters, certainly won't hang them, and at the same time, the Iranians are playing their old game. Iranian television with this barely veiled threat towards the president. Earlier this week, they showed a photo from Butler, Pennsylvania last July with the caption, "This time the bullet they're talking about won't miss." I mean, I thought this would really anger the president, but apparently he's taking it calmly.
He may be keeping his cards close, but I believe he's outraged by events in Iran and is actively supporting the protesters. And I think the fact that help is already on the way in the form of an aircraft carrier and a carrier strike group shows that the president is keeping all his options open.
It was a mistake for the Iranians to show those photos of Trump with a bloody ear and right there, "This time we won't miss," or "Next time we won't miss." They're fools. They're making the United States president's attitude toward them emotionally charged. They don't know how to negotiate. They're stuck in the Middle Ages. They know how to be cunning, flatter, deceive, stall, and they think they know how to intimidate. That's the mistake of all short-sighted people or people who are too self-confident. Not to remove the personal from any negotiations, but on the contrary, to bring the personal into solving issues. From my point of view, there is nothing worse, nothing more foolish, nothing worse or more foolish they could have come up with for negotiations.
On Earth, in Iran, I believe we are witnessing the most dramatic historical event of our lifetime, as this regime may soon become Mahdi again.
This is perhaps the most dramatic event that has happened again in the last 2 years. I don't know where these next years will lead this whole region and the whole world, but these are the facts. According to official reports from the Islamic Republic of Iran, there are currently more than 600 victims in the protests. But you have additional reports from external organizations, human rights organizations that are outside of Iran and report much higher numbers. More than 12,000 and up to 16,000 victims during the protests, and that's not counting those who were detained by the regimes. Those numbers are in the tens of thousands. The fact that the regime is holding quick show trials and executing protesters shows its fear, and we don't know what will happen next. So Trump said, "Go ahead, take control of the situation. Help is already on the way. And Mahdi, what should we do?" Does this mean the United States is sending troops? Will the United States increase sanctions against the Islamic Republic of Iran? They seem to have already started, but will it be sufficient?
Well, we don't know, but what we do know, if we look at the series of revolutions that have taken place in the Middle East over the past 50 years, is that there is a trend, and I'm going to break down the options, and that's the trend. Sometimes it's a matter of 3 days, sometimes 90 days, sometimes several years of demonstrations before something or a government is overthrown. But in reality, there is a point at which the government breaks. This point is usually marked by one of two things, either the government fleeing or it being replaced by someone else.
A modern example is what happened in Syria, where their leadership simply moved to Russia.
And by the way, this was actually spread, as I believe, by Western intelligence agencies, who hinted that Khamenei and his closest circle were planning to flee from Iran to another country. And then...
Rumors about this have circulated for a while, but I don't know if they're true.
I doubt it came from the Iranian government, so that's one possibility. And usually this happens when the government stops using violence against its own people, when the army or the secret police, or a combination of them, decide that they will no longer fight against their own people and stop using weapons.
But Iran's regime is smarter than that. They are always one step ahead because they brought in mercenaries from Iraq, they brought in mercenaries from Lebanon, terrorists, to try to suppress the protesters themselves. And these are people who don't even speak the same language. They speak Arabic, not Persian. They're not Iranians. They're Arabs who came from other countries.
Dictatorships often use these methods. It's not unusual. They will prey on the weak, the less intelligent, the less educated, and they will try to direct their energy, their hatred, at a supposed internal enemy, and it could be an external enemy as well. Let's go to war with Israel. In this case...
Why is Israel quiet right now? Which of the options?
Yes, or another option. Let's turn this against the elites, those who hold your money and the corrupt in the streets. Russia and China pit groups against each other, something Venezuela failed to do. Yeah, well...
They were a kleptocracy that stole so much there was little resistance. No, the Iranian regime doesn't steal as much, but in my view, they use the same playbook.
This conversation is also interesting to me because it's being held by Israelis, guys who have served in the army, journalists, professionals. They aren't bound by orders from the channel's management because they are the channel's management. Now, do you remember William Browder, who lobbied for and succeeded in getting the anti-Putin Magnitsky Act passed in Congress? In the United States Congress, of course, Putin considers him, William, one of his main enemies.
Putin lost Syria. He lost Venezuela as a satellite country. And we know that right now with Iran, we don't know how things will turn out. But if he loses Iran, again, the Americans did such a powerful job by capturing Maduro. Putin seems unable to hold on to any of his allies, not a single one of his client states. And this really makes him look weak. It makes America look like a superpower, and Russia like a weakening regional power.
Will said this. He said it in an interview with the British The Trump Report. Here's what Will said about Ukraine. And he says what we've already discussed with you several times.
Putin can't back down. Putin needs this war as a way to distract attention so that people don't get angry at him. He is completely tied to this war. And if for some reason it suddenly ends, he will have his own political problems in Russia. So I don't think the war will end. And I think that what's happening now, as he gets more and more desperate, is that he's losing more and more soldiers. All he does is kill Ukrainian civilians. He's basically a terrorist. For Ukraine, every day feels like September 11th, because their ordinary people are just being killed for no reason at all. They're not military. These aren't military targets. They're just ordinary people being killed in their apartments. Vladimir Putin, because he needs to vent his anger.
I've said many times that Putin can't end the war without some, I don't know, he needs a brilliant victory and he can't just pull back. There are about 700,000 servicemen there, drunk on blood. Not all of them are on the front line. I think there are about 200,000 on the front line. Yes, but all of them are involved in this. They've gotten used to killing, whether by their own hands or someone else's, whether nearby or dying. They've become accustomed to death and killing. And now bringing them back to a country where there's nothing for them to do, no jobs, they'll all join gangs to rob, kill, or overthrow if they're directed there.
And this is what Putin is hoping for, that despite the unimaginable losses, and we're talking about 1,000 people, 1,000 Russian soldiers dying every day. But he hopes that we will get tired before he does, and he thinks this way because he lives in a dictatorship, in his own dictatorship. There's no one to remove him through voting, so he can impose the harshest punishments on his own people. And even if we experience just 1/100th of that in our democracy, in our free media and so on, we all, rack our brains saying, but should we continue to support Ukraine? And that's his big bet, that we'll abandon Ukraine before he runs out of resources to continue this war.
And yet the year began with a more assertive America, with more aggressive rhetoric ready to intervene in Venezuela. Talks about seizing Greenland by force if necessary and attacking Iran. How do you think the Kremlin views this?
Well, on the one hand, the Kremlin is rubbing its hands with joy. They look at this and say, if America wants to take Greenland, why does anyone have claims against us for Crimea or Ukraine? It doesn't matter. That's one argument, one reason for them to celebrate. However, on the other hand, and this is very important, the American military operation to overthrow Maduro was grandiose. Another thing, besides losing their client states, if their whole reason for invading Ukraine was NATO, as they claim, NATO expansion, that was one of the pretexts. So what do you think? While they are fighting a war in which they've lost 1,200,000 of their soldiers, in Russia, Finland and Sweden joined NATO. This ended up being totally unexpected, and it completely contradicts all their stated goals for this special military operation, and it's absolutely against whatever they claimed as the goals of this special military operation.
Finland is, of course, talking about Ukraine rather than Iran, but even from what he said, it was enough to understand that Russia... Well, from the point of view of, let's say, people in America who understand what politics is, who participate in it, who are in the know, who have, as they say, maybe not informants, but first-hand information, that Russia is losing country after country. Finland, yes, so to speak. Sweden, Armenia, yes. Armenia has practically gone over to Turkey, and the United States of America, Armenia has gone to Turkey. It's unbelievable, yes, Moldova is pushing Russian soldiers out of Transnistria, and now Venezuela, Syria, and very likely Iran. No matter how things end with Iran, Iran will at least partially reorient itself toward the United States of America and not toward China and Russia. Maybe it could go both ways, but it will still be a restraining factor. For him, I'm not sure. Maybe it's a hammer over the neck or a sword over the head, or maybe the other way around. And then look, there's Lebanon and Yemen too. If Iran doesn't give them money, weapons, or support, let me explain. A worker in Iran today, because of the wild inflation, earns from $7 to $10 a month, from $7 to $10 a month. And a fighter in Hezbollah in Lebanon gets $1,800 a month. And the Lebanese know that Hezbollah receives it, and the Iranians know that Hezbollah receives their money from the sale of their oil. Their government takes the money and sends it to terrorists instead of helping them solve their problems. Do you think the population of Iran is very happy about this or not? I don't really want to finish with the following. In the Middle East, changes are coming, definitely coming, and they could be epoch-making. There, the Shah's arrival, the alliance with Israel and with the Sunnis, a super alliance, I would even say. The population is over 500 million, including Persians, Arabs, Jews, Druze, and Circassians. Funds come from the oil states, the principalities, yes, technology from Israel, the ability to organize and sell from Iran. This is a powerful entity under the working title Abraham Union. Although, well, Persians, Farsi speakers, Persians, of course, are from a different ancestor. In my opinion, they will be able to become a serious free market, a powerful technological base in that part of the world, and be competitors, well, let's say to South Asia, but at the same time be allies with both the United States and that same South Asia and the Japan-Asian bloc. Why not? Trump is ready for negotiations with Iran because Iran well, finally seems to be ready for real negotiations, and not for deception, forgery, fraud, hidden envy, and hatred toward the Satan America and the little Satan Israel. It seems to me that Trump has pressured Iran to the point where it can be negotiated with, but he hasn't pressured Russia enough yet. Not Russia, not yet. Well, we started with the smaller ones first, and then when we get rid of the small ones, maybe we'll be able to take down the bigger ones too. Someone, can you guess who? Goodbye.